So, the bark filter processor, what is this thing? It's a pretty big module at 34 HP and you may be wondering, what can I do with this? It doesn't really have a cutoff knob, nor does it have resonance. Instead, it has all these 12 bands with fixed frequencies. The number written below each fader is where the frequency centers, and these bands were chosen relative to the bark scale, hence the name. The first and last bands are respectively low pass and high pass, and the 10 other bands are steep band pass. Then you get a VCA input for each band, a follower output for each band as well, which sends an AD envelope relative to the strength of the signal at that band, and of course an individual filter output, which is so useful to send all these bands throughout your system. Then there are 4 preset output, the odd filters, even filters, and the all filters, which is basically a mono output. There's the CV output all followers, which sums the value of the individual followers. There's a follower decay knob, which is like a decay envelope for the followers. The switches allow you to route the followers to the VCA input odd to even or even to odd. So this can help use the module for spectral transfer and also basic vocoding application. Then we have 2 little shaft knobs for the input gain. Unity is at 12, so you can definitely boost line signals to the bark filter, like you can process drum machine directly into it, have it on a stand from your computer. If you plug just mono in into the even or odds, it's gonna copy the signal to all the bands. But you can also use the module with 2 different signals, one to the odds, one to the evens. Then we have what is probably the most important part of the module, the scanning section. This is directly inherited from the harmonic oscillator, and these 3 controls allow you to animate the bark filter processor with just 2 or 3 CV signals. So the width will choose how many bands are active at once, and the center will choose the center of the width, so where the modulation starts in these 12 bands of the bark filter. Then the spectral tilt will tilt your signal towards the higher frequencies or the lower frequencies. These 3 macro controls combined can help you having a lot of movement on the bark filter processor. You might think such a big module, so many inputs, it's gonna eat my modulation alive, and of course it can be the case if you use 12 envelope for the 12 CV input of the VCA, but actually you don't need that many. It's nice to have a few VCA spare to use the filter outputs. It's nice to have 1 or 2 envelope to animate 1 or 2 bands, but it's very fun to wiggle all these faders and send 1 or 2 CV signals to the width or center, and then there you have it. It's moving, it's alive, the modulation never really repeats itself. It's great. Okay, so I think a good first patch to get an idea of how the bark filter processor sounds is to send some kind of noise through it. So we're going to use the metallic noise of the random sampling. The metallic noise is 6 detuned square waves, which is kind of same sound you have for the hats in a 808. So it's really useful for percussive sound, and it's a bit more harmonically rich than just noise. So it's going to be perfect to get a feel of the sound of the bark filter. As you can see, as soon as I plug the noise into either of the inputs, the LED light up. So the LED indicate how powerful the sound is at each band. And of course, it's quite dependent on the input gain. We're just going to use the gain at Unity here because this is modular level, so there's no need to boost anything. So let's just manually hear all these bands. Oh, I think like unity of the bands is around here. It's not written anywhere, but to me it sounds a bit boosted afterwards. With noise it's not obvious at all, but with if you have another sound like an oscillator, it's a bit more obvious. So you can really slice the sounds into 12 bands, which is really, really fun. So let's animate all this thing. We can use the voltage multistage. It's pretty convenient. I'll use one row of CV into the width, for example, or the center. And I'll use the fluctuating random from the random sampling into the width. One thing to note is that it's quite important to have strong modulation sources. The whole verbose system works with 10 volts. So if you want to really use the whole range of modulation, if you have 8, 10 volts, it's much better. If your sequencer only does 5, and you are on the far right of here, maybe you won't reach like the lowest bands and all this. It's not, and same for the VCA. If you really want to open the band, it's nice to have a powerful modulation source. Most envelope go at least 8 volts, but some only do 5, so check your system before. So I'm just gonna move a few sliders on the voltage multistage, and you see it's in the center. So if I unplug this, the center is on the far right, but you can move it wherever you want. So I'll put it in the far right and have the attenuator on the far left. And now we are gonna impact the width of these LEDs with some random . So this is going into the scan and pan dry. There's absolutely no effect, but of course it becomes quite interesting once you put some delay or reverb on this. Let's add some tape delay. And you see I only have 2 CV coming from, one is a sequence of CV and one is just some fluctuating random. We can take the fluctuating random and have some step random instead. Sort of sound like very dub techno stabs if you managed it correctly and fine-tune this patch. It can be really nice when you think about it. It's just metallic noise coming in. So of course there's all these outputs. So let's take one and we can put it into LPG. I really like to do this to have additional percussive sounds from the same sound source. So I'll use the Make Noise LXD. I'm using the lower band. And well, we'll use the reference output of the multistage, put it into the CV input. And I'm taking the output of the LXD and going straight into my scan and pan. And if you haven't checked yet, there's a tutorial on the voltage multistage, but I won't go into detail about this. But let's have the all followers output. So this is a CV output, which Basically, the LEDs here represent the intensity of the sound coming in, but also the follower output and the length of the envelope. So if you move that here, the envelope that's going out of these, or this one, is going to be shorter, and here is going to be longer. You can't really see it on the LED here because it's a continuous sound coming in. It's more obvious with some percussive sounds, but we'll try that patch later. So I'm gonna go take the follower out and put it through my signal selector of the sequence selector, which is being advanced with a clock divider. And I'm sending back the follower output. So this one takes the maximum value of all of these followers, or it adds them. I don't know if it's different. And it sends it out, so it's going through a sequential switch, and now it's going to impact the time of my voltage multistage. So the envelope that's opening my LPG for that percussive sound is going to get longer at times. You can hear it now. We can also have fun with the individual bands. Let's send some gates from the voltage multistage directly to the bands. What we're doing here is basically spectral sequencing. We're just sequencing the spectrum, the audible spectrum of the noise through the Bark filter. Let's take this out. So here I'm taking one of the followers, sending it through the second selector of my sequence selector, and I'm plugging it back into the frequency scan width. So you can see that the Bark filter, through a sequential switch, it's modulating itself, basically. And it's also modulating the time of the voltage multistage, impacting the small percussive sound. Let's take another gate. And we can put it into the spectral tilt, which we haven't used that yet. It's not too obvious, maybe too quick. Let's put some random instead in here. You see here it's still high passed. The random from the random sampling is tilting the frequency towards the high frequency. If you put the AT inverter the other way, it's going to tilt it towards the low frequency. But the modulation is still active on every band and on these macro controls as well. It's not a super complicated patch, it's just mainly one random and just a voltage multistage and a sequence selector to have some variation, because if you send the followers directly to a parameter all the time, since it's a continuous sound, the followers are basically always on, so it's not incredibly interesting because it's going to be always the same. As a second patch, I'd like to show you the DFAM into the Bark filter processor. It's a pairing I use a lot. For those of you who've seen the New York Modular Society short live I just did, I'm using these two a lot because I really like how the Bark filter imparts its very strong signature sound on the DFAM. Also, the DFAM has such a huge sound, big, fat, and bold. So the Bark filter, you can really narrow the frequency you'd like to use and cut the ones you don't want. You can really fine-tune your sound. Just before all this, as an example, I'd like to show you the raw DFAM sound and also the DFAM ran through the Bark filter processor, just so you can get an idea of how these two compare. So I've melted the raw DFAM sound into a mixer. Here's the short sequence, basic DFAM sequence. And here it is through the Bark. There's a clear difference. You can hear those very steep filter bends already eating at the sound of the DFAM, and I really think it's a great thing that the Bark filter processor has such a big signature sound. Of course, you have to love it, otherwise there's no point getting that module. Let's close all the bands. Keep the Bark filter processor sound. And I've already plugged a few cables, so on the DFAM there's the pitch row of knobs, which is going into the VCF modulation input. So I've melted that with a tip-top cable, and I'm going into the center. And so the pitch knobs here are gonna choose the center of the Bark filter, the center frequency. And next I've used the decay envelope and I've put it into the width. Of course, if you move the VCA envelope here, VCA decay envelope, it's gonna impact how the Bark filter reacts. Now, what we can do is use the Bark filter to modulate that knob. To do that, we'll just take the all followers output, put it through the sequence selector so that the modulation only happens some of the time. And now you can hear the knob moving by itself. I'm clocking the sequence selector with a clock divider. It's dividing my clock by 5. We can try with the second oscillator with some FM on it. Let's throw some tape delay on this, some L capstan. Let's bring some drums. We can boost the input gain so that it slightly distorts.
instead of the all followers out, we can put several followers through the sequence selector and maybe get a different result. Maybe a bit too much. Sometimes it's hard to resist the urge to overmodulate. Of course, as you may know, the DFAM really benefits from external modulation. That's why it's semi-modular. So with the bark filter, you have all these followers output, the maximum all followers output as well. I personally like to put this through switches or VCA just to have control over the modulation and don't send everything full on all of the time. But yeah, if you have a DFAM, maybe get a bark filter. They really work well together. Okay, so now let's use the bark filter processor with an oscillator. We will use the trusty complex oscillator with the bark filter. It's going through the amp and tone first. It's just to act as a VCA. We are not going to touch the filter for now. So the bark filter is really perfect for these rich, complex sound source. So obviously, any form of complex oscillator you have will be a perfect match so that all these harmonics can be cut by the bark filter. Also, some digital oscillators would be great, like all the noise engineering offerings. I still have the Localic Iteratus Persido, which I love, and for the longest time I used to use them together, basically never unpatch them. But yeah, any form of rich, complex signal would be really perfect. So I have a short sequence from the voltage multistage, which is opening the multi-envelope. And the multi-envelope is going into the amplitude and tone controller. And the amplitude and tone controller is going into the bark filter processor. But first of all, I want to show you the difference of tone between the complex oscillator going through the amp and tone directly into the scan and pan, and the complex oscillator going through the amp and tone and the bark filter processor going into the scan and pan. You'll see there's quite a big difference. So this is just the oscillator. Let's have it drawn so it's really clear. And this is it through the bark filter. Sorry. And the bark filter again. I think it's really clear how the bark filter processor has a character and imparts it on any sound source you put into. So this patch is for now fairly easy. Like I said, the voltage multistage is sequencing. There's an envelope, there's a VCA, there's an oscillator, and this is going into the bark filter processor. You can see the LED lighting up. But now I've closed all the bands, and I've used a second envelope from the multi-envelope. Well, it's actually the same envelope as different output going into the width. And what you can do is just, if you have a VCA before, just use the bulk filter processor as a filter. So with the width, you can choose how much it will open the filter. And of course here, I've put the center very low. So basically it's a low pass filter, but you can use it as a band pass filter if you choose the center to be anywhere else. And of course you can choose the width as well. Or even a high pass filter. By the way, all of these are band pass filters. This one is a high pass, this one is a low pass. Let's put it back into low pass filter for now. So this is opening all the bands. Something else we could do is just choosing a few bands, sculpting sound like we want, and take the envelope and open a band in particular. Then you can put some modulation, like a fluctuating random, into the width. This is going to impact the bands, but your manual mix will stay the same. And you can choose the center still. This is the smooth random. Let's try with a step random. Let's put that one elsewhere. And then you still have all those outputs. So once again, we are using the sequence selector, and we can choose some of the outputs that are not really used here, or the ones where the bands are low. So I'm plugging these bands into the sequence selector, and then I'm sending the sequence selector into LXD and LPG to have some percussive sounds. So the selector will sequentially go through these different bands and send them to the LPG, and the LPG is sequenced by a bin sec, which is a small 4 HP trigger sequencer by Noise Engineering, and the resulting percussion is sent to the Jomox T resonator. So you get, every time the sequence selector advances, you get this band, this band, this band, this band, this band. It's always going to change. So you have this strange stereo percussion with the filtering and delay from the T resonator. Then you can, the LXD as a strike input, which I'm using now, and a CV input. We can put the CV input, we can take a gate from the multistage and send it into the CV input to have some more percussion. And then we could put some delay on the main sound. And bring the drums. And you can still play with the bends. Here I'm putting some fluctuating random into the center to have some variation. Then we can just start to mess with the cutoff of the ambient tone to change the signal that's going into the bark filter. I have LFO from Batumi that's slightly modifying the cutoff. Let's see, try the CVB of the voltage multistage sending into the complex oscillator timbre. I think you can really hear the character of the bark filter in here. Even when there's some effects and stuff like this, it's still very noticeable. The bark filter, by the way, is going into a DPLR delay. That's the delay here. There's a tiny amount of space reverb as well. So yeah, this is Complex Oscillator and Bark Filter. I think they work really well together, a perfect pairing. Who would have guessed? Verbose and verbose. So that's it for me for the Bark Filter. I've tried to show you a few of the ways I use it the most. I know you can also use this as a basic 6-band vocoder. To be honest, I've never really done it, so I didn't see the point of recreating the patch. There is a great video about this on YouTube, I'll link it in the description. But yeah, this is the way I use the most. Process the DFAM, run an oscillator through it, just animate noise to make ambiances. It's a fantastic tool, it's not a special effect at all. I use it really pretty much in every patch. I haven't regretted once since I got this module. If you like filter banks, I think it's one of the most characterful and best on the market. I haven't tried a Fumana, but this one has a great, strong personality, which I really enjoy. If you like this video and would like to see more tutorials and demos, I've just launched a Patreon page, so feel free to join. There will be more demos, more stuff like this, mostly about modular, but also about the Jomox alpha base, maybe more about the DFAM, also some rack stuff I have. It's always nice. I enjoy talking about gear and I enjoy the process of making these videos, so there will be more in the future. I will also try to talk a little about music. I'm a music lover and record collector, so it's always nice to talk about music and show people some of the records that influence my music. I'll try to put a lot of stuff for free as well, MP3 samples. Everything that comes out of the modular and the video will probably be free to download if anybody like it. So yeah, a Patreon page. Cheers and see you next time.